this one's crazy. We've got a doctor, Dr. Lin, out of Richland, and he fled communist China. He's a Christian, and he wanted that better life in America. I mean, talk about, a terrible full circle.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You left because you converted to Christianity and you were at risk. And now for standing again on your principles, this time scientific and medical, you're still being persecuted by the state.
Truth is freedom.
Hello and welcome to Truth is Freedom. I'm Dennis Cummins, the pastor here at Experience Church. Glad that you're with us. And today we have a special guest running for Attorney General for the state of Washington, Pete Serrano. Pete, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Pastor, so much. I'm love being back here. You know, this is one of the first events that I did when we kicked off Silent Majority Foundation. I know we're going to talk about that. But it's great to circle back that, this next opportunity with the Attorney General's race to come back here and be early in the race. So thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And, when I heard that you were running for Attorney General, I'm like, oh, man, he's a shoo-in for this because we need somebody with the mind and the heart that really stands for the freedoms of the people constitutionally. And, our connection, most of our viewers, just to help them understand, we connected during the pandemic and the lockdowns, all the craziness. And Pete was a great, strong voice as an attorney to help us navigate a lot of those pieces. And you've helped so many people. And matter of fact, why don't we just rewind the clock and talk a little bit about that and unpack some of those moments?
Yeah. So, just going back to 2021, it started for me literally in my buddy's home gym because, gyms were of the devil at the time.
Yeah.
Everyone would die from COVID. And I'm working out with a buddy of mine who's now one of our board members at Silent Majority Foundation. And I was complaining, we're literally doing curls, looking in the mirror, and I'm just like, oh, where are the attorneys? No one's doing anything. And unfortunately, I'm looking in the mirror while I'm saying this, and God puts in my mind, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And so for the past 3 or 4 years, and I've always tried to live with that question in my mind, right? Of what are you doing? But it really, really hit me of like, you can't complain if you've got this ability and capability to go help people about other attorneys not doing anything if you're not willing to do anything. So at the time, I was working for a state agency called Energy Northwest, where we produce nuclear power and other power sources that power most of the Pacific Northwest. And I will note that we were not under a vaccine mandate. It was one of the very few state agencies that flew under the radar.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was working on the small modular next generation technology. I was going to permit those technologies here in the United States for the first time. We've seen it deployed in Canada and Asia and in Europe. And it's that next generation of power if the United States is willing to accept it. And I had this great career path and things were awesome. I was excited. And then the pandemic hits and I talked to my wife and I have this experience working out. And I say, hey, look, her name's PJ. I know you've met her. PJ, I think I got to do something. I don't know what it is. And of course, like any good man, it's like, all right, put that aside. Yeah. Someone else will act. And then after a few weeks, after a couple months, we had prayed and we started a nonprofit organization, Silent Majority Foundation, and then got connected to you through Representative Jesse Young. We were meeting up here trying to figure out, this is when the House members had a vaccine mandate.
Yeah.
And they had to show their papers to get on the floor. And so we challenged that. And, we've just had this immense growth at Silent Majority Foundation from kind of pushing back about the government overreach from COVID to now we've got several firearms cases. We've got a 10-round magazine case, that so-called large capacity magazine challenge that we're having heard 5 days from now on the 11th of March in Cowlitz County. And the judge has asked one question: is this law constitutional? It's great. That should be like the lowest, it shouldn't even be a hurdle, let alone a high bar, right? Mm-hmm. But that is where the judge is starting there. And it's amazing to have a judge in Washington ask that question: is this constitutional? Right. And then we'll talk about whether or not it's enforceable, but we'll start with, is it constitutional? And I was actually on my way up here, once I stopped in the parking lot, got on my hotspot and sent over the last pleading that we have that's due today, our reply in that, and my colleague Austin Hatcher that helped write it or that drafted it, he's got some great stuff, and it's really, this is a ban, it's unconstitutional, and it's written, especially this document is written so that the everyday layperson can read it, and we try to do that with our pleadings so that folks can understand that. And so for the past 3.5 years, Silent Majority Foundation has been this awesome opportunity to stand for individual rights, to stand for the Constitution, to try to make sure that people know that, as the term is used in Washington's Constitution, the divine creator is looking out for us.
Yeah.
And that was the compact that the individuals that created our state had with the divine creator or God or, however you want to acknowledge him. And, I love that we've got this great language that protects you and I, not only our rights to worship, but our rights to bear arms. They shall not be impaired is the language here in the state of Washington. And so we've got this beautiful Constitution that was just, trampled. It was ignored and tried to be torn up, and we've stood to defend it. And, obviously now the next level is me running for Attorney General to stand up and use the resources of that office to actually do what's right for the people of Washington.
Well, exactly. One thing that we've seen, especially through the lockdowns, the mandates, that the state of Washington is one of a handful of states that is trying to unhinge our rights from the Constitution. They don't like the Constitution. I don't think our current Attorney General likes the Constitution.
Yeah, he likes to send out checks to everyone when it's time to vote for him. So I guess next 4 years we'll see another swath of checks. But yeah, he's defending these laws. The legislature passes them, and then his office takes the $700 million and 1,200 staff that the legislature gives to him. It's
crazy.
Our tax dollars.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that you and I are paying for these legal services. So if anyone ever wants a pro bono legal services, contact your attorney general. That said, tongue in cheek, the problem is that he's using that almost $7 billion a year. This is one of the largest law firms, if not the top 5 in the country.
Amazing.
Not just the state, clearly the largest in the state. And they're supposed to be acting on our behalf. For example, the gun case we have, they brought it under the Consumer Protection Act. And the claim here is, well, you illegally sold these, therefore you're defrauding the people. And it's like, I don't know about you, but when I ask for a 15, 17, 30 round magazine and I get one that's not that, now I've been defrauded.
Yes, exactly.
But if I say, hey, I want a 15, I don't care that it's banned at this time, or a 30, and you give me a 30 or a 15, it's like going to McDonald's and getting the hamburger you ordered. Well,
right.
That's not my problem, right?
Yeah.
And so he's used the Consumer Protection Act in a way that it was never intended. He's highly politicized it. He's highly politicized the law. The Attorney General should be, I use this analogy, that when you look at the statue of Lady Justice, she's blindfolded, right? That's an intentional act. She's not blind. She hasn't been blinded. She has had a blindfold placed on her, and she's got those scales that are balanced on the facts and the law and the evidence. And she's intentionally placed those blinders on so she can balance those things.
Not be biased.
Exactly. And sadly, the current Attorney General has clearly biased the law. I'm running as a Republican. There are 2 Democrats in the race. One used to work for Jay Inslee. I think there's enough said about him.
Yeah.
And then the other lady's name is Monka Dingra, and she's the reason police pursued some of these kids' so-called health laws under transgender issues, the firearms laws. She's a co-sponsor on all those. So everything that my organization, the Silent Majority Foundation, has stood against, she stood for or brought forward or somehow advocated for. So it's a very clear, stark choice of...
Yeah. Well, what I see is, Bob Ferguson has been an activist for an agenda, a pro-liberal agenda to unhinge family rights, to unhinge our religious freedoms. And we saw that in tandem. And now he's running for state governor. So just buckle up there, for that race. And then this next lady that she's also running for attorney general that you just mentioned. These people are the problems that we're facing in our state. And nobody's holding these people accountable because we don't have a majority voice, because people aren't voting. People aren't engaging. I think it was 29% in Pierce County, second largest county, voted. 29%, that's it. And then they wonder what's wrong. Why is my car being stolen? Not once, twice, 3 times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so to those listening, to those who aren't actively engaged, get engaged. Tell your neighbor to vote. Listen, ballot harvesting, I don't like it, but it's legal here. And so to the extent that you have a neighbor who you know is not voting, say, hey, listen, can I sit with you? If you fill it out and sign it, I will take it. You know, same thing with the church, right? You know, if you got patrons that you know aren't actively engaged, that aren't voting, that there's an opportunity for a call for repentance and action. Listen.
Well, what we're doing, I call it a ballot protection program. And so people will be able to come. We can help educate them on how they should vote. We won't vote for them. But then we'll have a chain of custody to make sure those ballots are protected and turned in and accounted for. And we need more of that because the other side is against any kind of accountability to make sure our vote counts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the election integrity stuff that I've been involved in through Silent Majority Foundation, we targeted letters to the auditors, each of the 39 county auditors. We actually had one right back. It happened to be my auditor, Matt Beaton in Franklin County. He wrote back and said, hey, you know what? I just realized that we've got some procedures and policies that need to be updated. Thanks for bringing these to our attention. We're going to rectify it. You know, please don't sue us. Which, you know, I mean, it's good when you have those folks, but, you know, Matt was one of the very few who actually took it seriously and actually, you know, took the next step to take action. If we don't have auditors or a Secretary of State who's interested or a legislature who's interested in making sure that our votes are fairly accounted and counted, it becomes problematic and it disenfranchises the people. And that's what's so interesting. I was actually talking with my folks on the way up about they're in Tennessee. And so they had their Super Tuesday and they were talking about how my dad had to go in, he voted early. He had to go in, show ID to get in, and then sat down at a table. 2 people checked his ID while he filled out the paperwork.
What a concept.
Right? And, you know, there's this claim that we have, and it's a fair claim. We have absolute privacy in the way we vote.
Yeah.
But the left has taken this as so far as to say, well, that means that you can't look at ballots or even envelopes post-election. You can't verify signatures because somehow that's racist because different races are disproportionately affected. And so there, to your point, there is no opportunity for you and I to check a chain of custody.
Right.
And it's just, you put it in there. And I understand why people just are disenfranchised and believe their votes don't count. But I can tell you this, one way to assure your vote won't count is to not vote.
You know, that's right.
You know, I mean, you guarantee it. And look, I hope that we can have free and fair elections, but at this point, I don't have control over that. So what I'm going to do is get out, try to get people to get out the vote, work with folks like you who are willing to help implement some sort of safety program that allows people to know, hey, my ballot it at least got to the auditor safely. What the auditor does with it is his or her problem.
Yeah. I want to go back because during the lockdowns, the mandates here in the state of Washington, something that we worked on helping people have freedom of choice concerning their medical choices versus pro-vax, anti-vax, no-vax, you know, freedom of medical choice. One thing that we drew down on was the difference between the effect of law versus the rule of law. And a lot of people didn't understand that and how that affected us so much because we didn't stand up on things that against things that weren't lawful, but yet there's a power there that tries to enforce it and intimidate. Can you unpack that a little bit and how that affected us here in the state of Washington?
Yeah, I mean, so I think what you're really talking about is the psychological effect, is that when the powers that be, whether they're legitimate or illegitimate, tell you to do something. I mean, look, you know, I'm a product of the 80s. If a teacher told you to sit down and shut up, even though that was rude, you did it.
Yeah.
You know, if a parent or any authoritative figure told you to do something, you did it. Or you would, you know, get spanked or worse, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is we have this government that just told us this is how you're going to live. You know, you are going to take this so-called vaccine, this experimental drug, and that's the only way you can keep employment. And then the government, whether it was coordinated effort or not, allowed or enforce this through private entities. You know, I mean, I can't tell you. I had a buddy who in Oregon sued Best Buy because they kicked his client out for not masking, right? You know, I mean, why is Best Buy telling you you can't buy a TV because you don't have a mask on?
Right.
Or in my case, I worked on a case in Pasco where I'm the seated mayor now. I've been on city council, and I had, as a council member, a pizzeria reached out and said, hey, Liquor Cannabis Board is taking my license because I'm not telling my patrons to wear masks between bites, right? And that was like the most ridiculous thing is that we had this, okay, sure, you can eat here, but every time you're chewing, you got to chew with your mask. I'm like, come on, man, this is ridiculous.
Right.
And so back to the effective law is people believed, well, the government says so, therefore I must do. And then our organization, other organizations stood up and challenged those so-called laws. We challenged some of the rulemaking successfully. We challenged the kids masking. And by the end of the lawsuit, the court said, well, I'm going to deem this what's called moot, which means that the mask mandate ends tomorrow. And as of tomorrow, this is a dead case. I said, listen, Your Honor, I'm still here. It's a live case because this government's going to bring this back. And he's like, well, I mean, can you state that with certainty? He said, no, but until they say they're not going to, this case needs to stay live. And we got the Assistant Attorney General on record of saying, okay, we will moot this out, but we assure you that if it comes back, you know, we agree that it's a live case in controversy and you can just bring it right back and reinsert it. And so, you know, while, you know, that lawsuit had the effect, back to the effective law, the effect of standing up was that the mask mandate ceased and it was never brought back. And there are so many things that unfortunately we had to fight this uphill battle. Again, 1,200 staff, $700 million just for our attorney general, right? And he's got the so-called state power behind him where people, you know, you get pulled over, you don't know why, you're still terrified, right?
Yeah.
And same thing, you know, he's infringing on your rights, but you're being told that it's legal. And most folks were just like, okay, I guess this is what I do. And fortunately, there were a handful of us, you guys, us, a couple of other organizations that were willing to stand up, and we pushed back. It's just, you know, when you're that small group, it's so much easier to play whack-a-mole.
Well, I remember we were reported many times, and health department called me on my cell phone, and I said, hi, and she goes, it's been reported that you're not enforcing people to wear masks and social distancing. I said, well, you could ask me personally. I could have told you that. and I reminded her, I said, I don't work for you.
Yep.
I'm not a state agent, and you don't have any authority under me, over me, or around me. So, you know, and she totally understood, but she couldn't say so because she totally backed off. Well, I just want to send you some documentation. I'm like, send it. That's fine. But this is where people, through ignorance, allow them to prevail because they're weak, they're anemic, and they don't want to stand up for their rights. And so, therefore, we capitulate and we constantly give up ground month after month, giving up our rights, and now they're taking our children through this transgender law. And so I'm absolutely sick and tired of the left politicizing an agenda and turning it into law and taking away our rights. And that's why we need somebody with a heart, with a brain, and with the ability to stand for our constitutional rights and stand with the rule of law, a moral law. And that's why I'm so glad that you're running for Attorney General.
Well, I really appreciate those compliments, and I will echo that that's true. You know, I mean, that I don't like to sound self-aggrandizing. That's who I am. That's who I have been. You know, I would say this: my parents named me Simon Peter, probably not unintentionally, right? And I'm not suggesting that I'm him, but that's a great example. And I'd say when you look at his character traits and his flaws and his successes, that's a lot of who I am. Where, you know, he's the guy that's like, Lord, you're walking on the water. I'll jump out and walk to you. Oh crap, I'm walking on the water and now I'm sinking in the water, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I have those moments where I feel like I am aptly named of like, oh yeah, I'll run for Attorney General. Holy cow, this is way too much. And then. Then I pray, and I actually had a conversation with a buddy of mine yesterday who's up in Lake Tapps, and we were talking and I said, hey, you know, my wife is always asking me, did you pray? You know, when I feel like the water's over me and I'm just trying to, you know, I mean, I've surfed, you know, one time I remember I went down and literally wave after wave, and after the fourth wave, I finally come up, right? That's how this feels. And it's like, crap, am I actually going to drown? Because I'm trying to balance a family. I'm trying to balance a full-time job. I'm trying to balance, you know, being in Pasco, I got to travel up here and it's 4 hours, and getting up to Linden is 6, and getting up to Spokane's 3, and over to Clark is 3, right? And so there's a lot that pulls on my time, but those times when I step back and listen to my wife and step back and pray and say, okay, I can't do this on my own, and I know I'm not doing it on my own, but I need a reminder. And I had that same conversation with a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, I was really upset with something that happened today. Maybe I need to go pray. And it's like, well, thank my wife for that. You know, and so, yeah, it's, you know, I'm going to approach the Attorney General's office the same way that I approach my life, which is prayerfully. And when I forget to, my wife will remind me, kick me in the butt and say, hey, dude, get on your knees and do what I can with the resources I have. The nice thing is, as opposed to running a 5-attorney office with, you know, scrapping for a $500,000-$600,000 budget, which I'm extremely proud of that we've built at Silent Majority Foundation over 3 years, including the pandemic years. You know, we've had this tremendous rise, but to do that instead with the resources of the AG's office, again, $700 million, 1,200 staff would be amazing. And people are like, well, how do you know that you're not going to be able to root out all the evil? And it's like, I know I can't root it all out, but the first day we sit down with the papers and say, here are the lawsuits that I know that I don't support. You can either find a new employment or you can sign it on my behalf, dismissing the case. Either way, by the end of business, it's going to get dismissed with my signature or yours. The question is whether you want to keep your job. You know, and guess what? The good news for those folks is they're going to land squarely on their feet at a law firm called Pacifica Law Group. And Pacifica Law Group is that revolving door for the Attorney General's office. In fact, one of my opponents worked for Jay Inslee, worked for Pacifica, got appointed by Biden. Guess where he works now? Pacifica, so he can run. That's just who they are. And they have a lot of contracts with the Attorney General's office. I can't wait to sit down with their general counsel and say, hey, here's your contract. Take it, you know, it's terminated. You want to sue me for breach? I don't care. I got $700 million and we'll use it somehow. And guess what? If that's where I spend it, even though it doesn't protect our rights, at least it's not trampling our rights.
Well, the agenda has to stop, and we have to get back to protecting people's rights and allowing the Constitution to live. We need police pursuits back, right? We need to protect our people. And it's not happening. So let's talk about some of the craziness. You talked about somebody being, they're going after them because they were prescribing ivermectin. What the heck is going on with that?
So I was actually on a witness prep call on the way up here with Pierre Corey. For anyone that's not followed the COVID medical treatment, frontline COVID critical care, FLCCC is Pierre Corey's organization. So he was one of the guys who helped with Paul Merrick and a couple other folks kind of, I don't want to say invent, because I guess it's a protocol and you don't do that, but he was one of the developers of the ivermectin, vitamin D, quercetin, zinc, etc. protocol that saved many lives. You know, we're talking throughout the world, millions, if not potentially a billion lives. And certainly in this state, thousands of lives. And so we are representing currently 4 different doctors who the Washington Medical Commission has a COVID misinformation statement. And it says basically pro-vax. I mean, this isn't verbatim, but pro-vax, anti-ivermectin. And it says your license can be potentially, you know, at risk. It's subject to discipline is how they call it. And so we've called them out, said you're enforcing this. Their comment is, we're not enforcing it. We're enforcing our disciplinary act. And it's like, well, how do you get there? Well, you violate these other standards. What other standards? What have you adopted? Well, you've got, we can't say that we're using our misinformation statement, but it's like when you look at the base facts, they're keying off of this. And so it's an unenforceable written rule that they adopted unanimously. And they're claiming they're not enforcing it, but there's no other way to get to a doctor prescribing or advocating for ivermectin, and somehow that's, discipline. They can actually discipline that, and it's clear that that's what they're doing. And so we've got 4 of these doctors. We've got Ryan Cole's one of the doctors. We're helping on his appeal. He's out of Idaho, and he was doing some telehealth work here.
Yeah.
And Ryan Cole was one of those real heroes of the pandemic that really stood up and said, hey, I'm concerned. I'm seeing, he's a pathologist. He's looking at the slides, the blood, right?
Yeah.
The cellular level. What is this doing to humankind? And he was very outspoken about it. We've got another doctor, Michael Turner. We're representing him, and we have his hearing. It's a 3-day hearing in 2 weeks. And we got Pierre Corey as one of the experts, and another pharmacist expert that says, hey, look, ivermectin has a very safe profile. Here's what it is, and here's its mechanism of action. Here's how it should and could and did help with COVID. So we're very blessed to represent these doctors. These are the folks that stood up for you and I and said, hey, I'll take the risk. Got a couple more doctors, Rick Wilkinson out of Yakima, who's in the twilight of his career, but he wants to fight the system. And so I love seeing that. And then we got, this one's crazy. We got a doctor, Dr. Lin out of Richland, and he fled communist China. He's a Christian, and he wanted that better life in America. I mean, talk about, a terrible full circle.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You left because you converted to Christianity and you were at risk. And now for standing again on your principles, this time scientific and medical, you're still being persecuted by the state.
Yeah.
And
see, this is the problem, though, is that they use bullying tactics with their large establishments, whether it's big pharma, whether it's the governor's office, attorney general's office, to intimidate people so badly that there's like, well, I don't want to step out. I'll just get crushed. And they're using that effect of, our authority, our position, and there's a lot of judges that are not, be careful, wholesome.
Well, it's not just that. One, they're not educated, and they're not interested in educating themselves. I mean, I'll call it out. I have no issue. And some, to your point, have been tainted. And then some just don't have the, I guess chutzpah is the right word in this setting, to stand up for what's right. It's like, I'll tell you, the very first lawsuit we brought, a judge named Dave Peterson, is the exact opposite of what we're talking about. He's down in Franklin County. We brought a lawsuit on behalf of one Department of Corrections officer for the so-called vaccine mandate. He worked in Connell in Franklin County. He lives in Franklin County. Like, everything about this, his name's Jeff Johnson. Everything about Mr. Johnson was Franklin County. And so we said, we're going to file the suit here, even though the statute may indicate that suing Jay Inslee, we have to go to Thurston County. I think it's an open question, and it hadn't really been litigated since Mount St. Helens. So we have 40 years of in a volcano versus COVID. It really seemed totally different, and so we took the case in Franklin County, and Judge Peterson said, "I'm going to keep it here." Well, one of the assistant attorneys general literally, now mind you, we're on a WebEx, so it doesn't take really someone that's crazy to do this, but he starts yelling at him, I've never lost these cases, and they've never transferred them, and blah, 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 29 and blah, blah, blah. It's like Bob Ferguson is, 99-0 against Trump, or like whatever his record is. Right. And so the judge, very tempered, Judge Peterson, very tempered, says, listen, Mr. Pakalis, I've heard you, and if you keep doing what you're doing, I will sanction you. Needless to say, he was very quiet after that. And he said, listen, I've been elected by these people to meet justice, and I'm accountable to them. I'm not accountable to you. I am going to do what I believe is right, and given the facts and the evidence before me, I believe it stays here in Franklin County. He said, and I know you're going to appeal this. I don't know how soon, but go ahead and appeal it to the Supreme Court. And needless to say, within 24 hours, we had an emergency appeal that had to be briefed within 48 hours, and the Supreme Court didn't do the right thing.
Yeah.
But, there are a handful of judges, and when I see them, I want to shout them out, give them, sadly, their accolades for doing the right thing, right? But like I said, this Cowlitz County judge, Judge Basher, I mean, his question about the magazine ban, is it constitutional? And the state will argue and argue, but the law and the other district courts and the circuit courts, and he's like, are they here in Washington?
Right.
Are they a superior court of Washington? Well, no. Well, no. Well, no. Okay. Well, then I guess I have my opportunity to make up my mind. Mm-hmm. You know.
Let's talk a little bit about the pastor in Spokane that you're working with. What happened there?
Yeah, so a guy named Sean Fuchs, he's out of California, and he came out and he made the huge mistake of having a worship service in Spokane, and he did it with Matt Shea, and I know Matt Shea's got notoriety for being on the edge and whatever. I mean, look, he's a pastor, he believes in Christ, so, props to him, and maybe we don't agree on everything else, right? And so he goes and he prays for the then sitting mayor, Nadine Woodward, at this event. And he prays, this was right on the heels of a huge fire in Spokane, that the Holy Spirit would consume them with fire. And of course, like, dude, he's not asking for pyrotechnics from God. And the other thing is he's been very outspoken and critical of the LGBTQ plus or whatever agenda. And so that's really where a handful, and I want to be clear, it's not the Spokane City Council, it's a 4-3 majority. Okay, so there are 3 who are dissenters on this position that are on our side, or at least, even if they take no position, are on the right to freedom to worship and speak.
Yeah.
So these 4 individual council members decide that they need to have a resolution condemning Mr. Fuchs and former Mayor Woodward for her being preyed on by him, and for him for his LGBT hate speech, which didn't, mind you, even if it happened in Washington, it's still not actionable. But this is for speech, from California and other publications, and so they took this resolution, and so we filed what's called a tort claim, saying, hey, we're looking at suing you. And you have to wait 60 days to file a lawsuit. But, the plan is to file the complaint here this spring and, bring it forward on behalf of Mr. Fuchs to have both his religious and his right to free speech. And again, especially when they're trying to punish him for speech that's never occurred here, it's ridiculous. And so we're trying to figure out, I've been, one of my colleagues is in contact with the mayor, and we just want to see where she is before we do anything. We don't want to either create more heartburn for her, or if she wants to jump in, we want to give her that chance. And so we're kind of playing it a little slow, but we're ready to tee that one up, because at the end of the day, a city should not be passing a resolution or any ordinance that says, hey, you can't say that.
Well, exactly. I mean, and this is where we're going. This is the road that they're hoeing down. This is Ferguson. I mean, he's tried to double dip on the DVE bill, and let's see, they just passed that hate crime bill, but it's very vague.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, so, if you have this speech that they term hate crime, and to your point, it's very vague. I mean, I think the law itself is unconstitutional for several reasons. One being, there's a standard called void for vagueness. And so when it's just generic hate crimes and they give you a couple examples, it's not very clear what they're criminalizing aside. I mean, here's the interesting thing is you hear folks who talk about, like, they'll have something that's anti-Semitic, and that's okay.
Right.
But then you have the opposite, which is, for example, anti-Gaza or anti-Palestine, and that is punishable. And it's like, whoa, that's the same exact statement, but about people that look and worship differently. Why is it okay to say that about someone else, or even anti-Christian? Calling someone a Christian nationalist, when I'm called that, does that mean that I've got the right to this hate crime? I'm sure I do under their standards, but guess what? It's not going to be enforced on the same level as some anti-Palestine.
Exactly.
And that's the problem, is they create this ridiculous standard that, one, it's void for vagueness, and 2, it's really enforced at the whim of whoever gets it in the Attorney General's office. And I will say this, it to me is very clear aggregation of more power by Monica Dingra, my opponent. It's like she's got this. There's this other oversight bill for policing. So, when police brutality happens, or, maybe like self-defense by a police officer, as we should probably call it. When that happens, she wants the AG's office, the Attorney General's office, to have oversight rather than either a local prosecutor, or typically what they'll do is, if it's a really high level thing, they'll refer out to local prosecutors. So Benton, Franklin County might not touch something that happens in either one of those two counties, but they could go to Kittitas. They could even come all the way up here to Pierce and say, hey, why don't you look into this? But she wants the AG's office to have that authority. And so, I'm watching this expansion of the Attorney General's office by statute. And it's very clear this is a play into, well, I want to build my resume for my future, right?
Right.
And I laugh at this stuff and it's like, great, I'll get elected and I'll either deny that authority and never use it, or the second thing that I think is very likely, 2025, you have a snapback legislation that says, oh, we don't want the Attorney General to have these authorities.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Serrano's there, the big bad wolf.
Oh, yeah. They would change all the preface then. The narrative changes immediately. And, I thought the last election 4 years ago was the most pivotal. But now I think this election is the most pivotal because we have the governorship, the Attorney General at stake. And this will solidify their position for the next 4 years and their agenda. And it will be unleashed at a level that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and we're watching the legislature aggregate power and create power that's never before existed. And I think to that point, people ask me why am I different, or why is our campaign different, or why do you see a path to victory? And it's like, one, you look at what I've been doing for the past several years of standing for individual rights, standing for the Constitution. That's a little different. We've had great candidates, but I've done a very specific action on behalf of the people of Washington for the past 4 years. You also look at how bad, to your point, it's not that your car's been stolen once or twice, but it's the third or the fourth time. And, either we can normalize that behavior and accept that that's how bad Washington is, or we can actually do something about it. And if voting against those people, whether you want to vote for me or just against her, that's fine. The only way you're going to get different, someone who's going to help you enforce the law, someone who's going to come to a prosecutor and say, what do you need? What can I do for you? By statute, I can give you resources. Are you down personnel? Are you down tools? Are you down expertise? Okay, let me comb through. This person's got that expertise. Hey, go on loan to Pierce County for 6 months.
Well, Pierce County, I had the sheriff on recently, and Pierce County is the lowest per capita. State of Washington is the lowest per capita of policing, and then Pierce County is the lowest of the nation.
Yeah,
and it's an epidemic, and we know that Ferguson agendicized his office and went after the sheriff, and of course he was acquitted. And that's after the local prosecutor wouldn't prosecute.
Yep. And
so, they're after anybody that doesn't sing their song and play to their narrative. And that's what's dangerous. As a pastor, I support biblical marriage. I support two genders. I believe two consenting adults can do whatever they want in the privacy of their life and their house. That's fine.
Yep.
Whatever. But the moment that you politicize that, turn that into the state religion, and then point their crosshairs at our children, oh, no bueno.
Yeah.
That's where it stops. And so that's where I'm watching the timeline to where they're going to make it illegal for me to even say that statement.
Yeah, and I, if we're not able to right the ship this upcoming year, then you're right, absolutely. I mean, Big Brother is already, I think Orwell's 1984 at this point is almost in rear view, right? Yeah. In great parts, there are a lot that are hindsight. And we looked at that book, and it's interesting, my understanding is there's a movie of it that just came out where Big Brother's the good guy.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, how the heck do you flip the tables on that? Like, it was very clear that that's not the intent of that book.
Yeah.
And so, what's terrifying is, to your point, people have asked me, well, what are you going to do when you get a case that you don't agree with personally, but the right thing is to, end up on the other side? I said, that's my prerogative to sit there and look at the law and say, do I have a way around this legally? No, then I've got to uphold it.
Yep.
People have asked me, to your point, like, if someone that's a consenting adult wants to have a different lifestyle, whether it's something like transgenderism, that's up to you. But as soon as you start putting it into the schools and telling my kids, that's where we have to draw a line. When you make it really the state's religion, and I've always thought there's an intriguing approach here is, when I hear knocks on Christianity, oh, God, you can't see, Jesus, you can only read about. It's like, well, two genders, and then now you're telling me I get to pick one because I feel differently. Where's the visible evidence that I'm truly not a man, right?
Exactly.
And so what's the distinction between the two? You believe in some sort of higher power, and that is your inner self telling you. So I think there's a lot of fun that we could have. And I don't mean that in some flippant manner.
Right.
By enforcing evidence, facts, and law, that to me is fun. And I think that's the fun that I could have with the Attorney General's office, saying, okay, hey, look, you want to do X, Y, Z, great. Prove that it's legal. I'm just not gonna stand by it just because you adopted it as a legislature with crappy findings of facts that are.
But see, here's the problem. They don't want to debate.
No.
They don't want to have the conversation. They don't want to look at the Constitution and the rule of law because they know they'll lose, and that's why they have to use their bullying tactics to push it through and scream and yell and threaten and then impose things. I mean, we saw it on January 6th. Right? What happened to all those people, the pro-Palestine people that went into the Capitol?
Yep.
Where is the insurrection?
Yep. Yeah, or where's the insurrection on I-5?
Thank
Right?
you.
You know, I mean, and so Bob Ferguson, he said the most with like 5 or 6 words. I haven't counted them. When a reporter, I think it was a King 5. So, we're not talking like a crazy Brandy Cruz or someone out there that's a right winger who clearly she's not, but she brings that actual center point to it. But it was a King 5. So theoretically, this is someone friendly who says, okay, Mr. Ferguson, are you working with WSP on this I-5 corridor shutdown? He said, that's my client. No comment. You just had people blockade the major arterial highway through Seattle. You had, my recollection is there was someone being transported to a hospital, in an ambulance. And we're not going to address the fact that that condition worsened because they were delayed in their treatment.
Yep.
Yeah, you're going to go ahead and prosecute doctors for prescribing ivermectin. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
I get what's happening, and I'm not blind to it. And it's sickening.
It's the hypocrisy. And I thank God that we have people like you that's willing to stand and call it out, because it's the hypocrisy I think so many people are tired of. But that's where, that statement, one backbone strengthens 1,000 others. And that's what we need. We need more backbones to stand up in this state and say, not on our watch, this is not acceptable, and we're going to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I'm grateful for folks like you who have a congregation and you've got a voice and you've used it effectively and you've educated people and you've brought guys like me or like Jesse in to talk about what the legislature in his case or what we can do in the court of law or how people can stand on their own.
Yep.
When we named Silent Majority Foundation, it was intentional. It wasn't just a flippant name. It was, we want the voice of the majority to no longer be silent. I've always joked that hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll just call ourselves the Majority Foundation, right? And drop the silent. But
that's right.
Until then, like our whole proposition is we work to defend God and the Constitution and your rights. But we're here as your voice until you can be your own. And so we work on educating, advocating, and then last stop is litigating. Unfortunately, because not that many people are willing to get loud, we are finding ourselves more often in the court of law. But to your point, if people are willing to stand on their own 2 feet or even stand with us as that crutch, then I'm happy to do that, 1. And 2, eventually you build that groundswell where it's like, yeah, these guys have worked themselves out of a job. Cool. You know what? If I can do that, fine. I'll find something else to do.
Yeah. So if I'm one of those non-voters out there that's just sitting there and I'm disengaged, but yet I'm not happy, what would you tell that person?
I would.
Why vote for you, Pete Serrano?
Well, I would say, if you've indicated or told me that you're unhappy, I would find out why. Presumably it's because the crime is rising, because your rights and your voice no longer matter. And my answer is this: if you trust me with your vote and support me, I will do everything I can to be that voice. Like I said, even if you have a differing voice, if your voice is a protected right, my job as Attorney General is to say, I don't like this, but I got to stomach it. Maybe I pass it off and someone else in my office takes care of it, that's their cause. And that's the great thing about, I know I talk flippantly about the 1,200 staff and the $700 million budget, but there are people who will have causes they're possibly willing to die for that I disagree with in that. And as long as they can handle those causes professionally, and as long as it's something that's constitutionally protected, we're good to go.
Yeah.
As soon as you veer off that realm of a protected right, now we have to either A, not do it, or B, sit down and say, is there a way we get here? Is this something that should be protected? And that's something that I will have the discretion to make that decision as the executive of that office, which is a lot of responsibility, but it's also exciting to say, hey, look, this isn't really a right. We shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And so that would be my plea to the disengaged voter. Give me a shot. I will stand for you.
Yep.
And if you find that I'm not, then call me out, please. Right? Let's know. My email will be public, right? And say, hey, look, I voted for you, but here are my concerns. Now, I'm going to tell you, we won't get to everybody's concerns all the time. But at the same time, I will use those resources as much as I can to stand for your and my voice.
So, Pete, how do they get a hold of you? How do they find out more about you?
Yeah, so it's real simple. Serrano, 4AG, SERRANOFORAG.com. That's the Attorney General's website. For anyone looking for Silent Majority Foundation, silentmajorityfoundation.org. And then both of those have contact, whether it's email or phone numbers. They can call, they can reach out through emails, usually easiest. That way I can actually read it. So Serrano4AG.com. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Same thing for Silent Majority Foundation. Look, I'm extremely proud of the work that we've done and that we're doing. And I look forward to the opportunity to do it as the Attorney General, as the person who's sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution and will stand for it. And I just look for that opportunity because there's so much we can do to protect our state. It's, I took a picture of the mountain as I was pulling up in the parking lot, and at some point eventually I'll tweet it out, and it's like, tell me that's not worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Tell me it's not. And you can disagree with me, but this state has such great resources, and I know we didn't get into it, but my background, I put 10 years intentionally into environmental and energy law, and those are resources that we're being told we don't have, and it's like, no, we've got plenty. They're abundant. We've got lots of great natural resources. We just need to actually use them, and we need to protect them properly, not just, we're going to conserve this and then let it get consumed by fire.
Exactly. We need better management.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's great. We're going to link all that information in the show notes. And Pete, thank you. I know it's a big sacrifice. Matter of fact, you're here on your anniversary.
I am.
Holy cow.
Yeah. No, I got to give PJ, my wife, a shout out. It's our 15-year anniversary. I appreciate you bringing that up. I love you, hon, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. I know people see my sacrifice because it's visible. But the sacrifice that she and my kids, Sophia, Lily, and Max, are undergoing, I love each one of them. I'm grateful to have a family. I couldn't do this with a different family.
Yeah.
Maybe not a different family, but I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They are all in. Every day I come home, my son, he's 5, he asks, well, did you win the race? And I was like, I'm still running, buddy. And, I know it impacts my kids and PJ, but I'm extremely grateful for their willingness to sacrifice because they, at the end of the day, she's all in with me, whether it's Silent Majority Foundation, whether it's the AG's race or being mayor of Pasco, she's all in on everything, and I could not do this without her. So, again, I love you, hon. I appreciate it. And, let's see what the next phase of life has. I think, God willing, we can make some huge, huge differences to protect this state and really show the United States that we're just on that uphill trend.
That's right.
We hit a bump in the road, but we're now soaring.
Yep. We have a chance.
We do.
Pete, thanks for being on. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Well, that's Truth is Freedom. Thank you for being a part, and I hope this helps you understand who Pete is. I can't tell you who to vote for, but you know what? I think the choices are obvious, and based on your heart and your values, it's going to be clear. So thank you. Don't forget, like, subscribe, share it out. And thanks for being a part of Truth is Freedom.
Thank you for watching this episode. Make sure to share this out, and remember, truth is freedom.